Mr. Manjot Singh.
Yes, Mr. Goswami, I just put my mic off mute.
Oh, thank
Yes, firstly, thank you very much for everyone. It was a late invite for me to join this meeting. So I was told last night that I'll be speaking. And I've had I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this, and I didn't have a lot of time to understand the entire concept of Ecoversity. So I apologize before I start if I haven't fully comprehended the entire concept. So, Mr. Goswami, I think I've been allotted 15 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So so clearly I'll be presenting. I don't think there's anyone else in the meeting from Australia. I'll be presenting an Australian perspective, an Indian perspective to the whole mediation thing, and I'll intertwine those things. But so I want the listeners to be able to ask me some questions, because I was told that my perspective could be quite different because I'm the only one from Melbourne. So we'll leave the last 5 minutes for questions that will make the meeting interactive. And I'll spend couple of minutes. So I'm a solicitor now, and I've been running a law firm. I've got 4 or 5 lawyers working with me for the last 2 years or so. And prior to that, I was a senior police prosecutor. And prior to that, I was a police officer. So my experience dealing with people goes back about 15 years since I've moved from India to Australia. And a lot of that experience has been mediating, negotiating, however, not in a commercial sphere, in a different. So right now I do a lot of family law stuff where I'm constantly mediating between departing spouses. I am mediating constantly to arrange custody arrangement for children. Prior to that, however, my job was quite interesting. As a police officer, I was a negotiator for Victoria Police, and I negotiated a lot of times people trying to commit suicide. We were often called to jobs where I was exposed to someone holding a knife or a gun, or they're at a bridge, they're about to jump down. And my job was to mediate between them and the evil who was there pushing them for that. So although I don't have much experience as a mediator or an arbitrator, I do understand I have sound knowledge of the mediation laws in Australia, but I also have a lot of experience, and I'll be talking predominantly my experience dealing with people. So yeah, in Australia, everything is regulated. It's a very heavily regulated country, and mediation, arbitration is one thing which is also heavily regulated. So you cannot mediate officially between 2 parties if it is not if you're not a qualified mediator or an arbitrator. Now, one thing that we miss here, and what came out of this Ecoversity, me reading the pamphlet that was provided with Ecoversity, we lack that knowledge of within. We lack that human knowledge. Our mediators are excellent in negotiating terms based on law, terms based on formulas, but we're not really good. I can talk about Australia, and this is the feedback we get from lawyers, barristers, parents. We're not really good at understanding human needs. We're not really good at understanding human sentiments, right, that go into a particular dispute. So when I was reading the Ecoversity pamphlet, something that struck me, that years ago I was at a conference in Adelaide in South Australia, and we had a discussion. I had a discussion with someone who I can't remember the name, but they were quite senior with one of the universities, and they said, what we need to do, we need to remodel our education system so we provide children with some sort of global education. It's not it's not working. It's not working in the world what we've been doing so far. For example, let me give you an example. The legal system that we have here is still quite colonial, right? It is very, very colonial. And people, although from the outside world, we're a Commonwealth country, from the outside world, it looks like Australia do have probably one of the best legal system, criminal justice system. However, there are some huge holes, huge gaps that we need to fill. For example, Australia is the only country where 10-year-olds can be remanded in custody. 10-year-old children can be remanded in custody. Now that comes from lack of actual knowledge of human beings. And that flows on to commercial disputes, that flows on to parenting disputes, that flows on to arbitration, international arbitration disputes. That mentality that Australia's been stuck in from the colonial times, back from the time of King George, it still looms like a dark cloud on our head as practitioners in Australia. However, when I read the pamphlet of Ecoversity, the first thing that struck my mind was a very old Indian concept, very old Vedic concept, where I was told when I was young that children didn't go to school until the age of 10. What they did until the age of 10, they acquainted themselves with nature, with others, relationships, animals, all kind of biodiversity. And then they started the education. And one of the known public speakers in India recently was at Harvard University, and he made a good comment that India in the ancient times didn't educate someone until they actually accepted that I am one entity. I'm one entity. I belong to the universe. I'm not an individual. So I think if Eco-University, if this concept goes on and becomes successful, first thing they need to do to introduce something where people who are going to become practitioners, or lawyers or mediators, they should understand, okay, let me rephrase that. They should be in sync, not with just the role they're doing. They should be in sync with something beyond themselves to understand the actual concept, to understand what's involved in a mediation or arbitration dispute. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that, what can work, what cannot work. The other thing is, when I was reading, we've had some other concepts where in Australia, in other countries, where people have started education in a way which is which similar sounds to what I was reading last night. And I again apologise, I may not have comprehended the whole concept. We also need to understand that from law, from a perspective of a legal profession, you cannot remove the authority from this profession, right? We need people to respect lawyers. We need people to respect judges. So although it's great to have a concept which involves everyone, it's all about humanity, it's about peace and tranquility and understanding nature, understanding everything else, but we still need to infuse. So if we have this, we still need to infuse the sense of leadership in a practitioner who will come out of if these universities go ahead. So people need to be able to strike a balance. At the moment, we don't have that balance. At the moment, I teach at one of the most prestigious law schools in Australia, that's Monash University. And it is still so old school. It is still so colonial. Students are not allowed. Students don't have time to actually do anything beyond law. They're constantly putting their head down, doing the assignments, reading old law, which may or may not be relevant. Some of the law is not relevant. University is still teaching that. So there is students don't even, when we tell people that, I'll give you an example. Scandinavia, in European countries, they're getting rid of prisons because they believe that prisons cannot reform an individual. Sometimes you need to put people in prison. However, in America and in Australia, we're building more and more prisons, and our recidivism rate is not going down. And when we try to explain to people that, hey, you need to teach people, I have the benefit of knowing a bit more than law because I grew up in India. I went to a school where yoga was part of syllabus. I had the benefit of reading Quran Sharif. I had the benefit of reading Bhagavad Puran, Mahabharata, and all that. And when I come here, when I look at people just looking for punishment, they can't even comprehend that there's another way to reform an individual. That comes from not having a balance in the education they're getting. So it also goes for people who will be running Ecoversity. They can't be totally focused on like you don't want this organization to be turned into, say, for example, a yoga school, because when I have this quote that keeps striking in my head, and I use that all the time. Dharma. So this is I read something about karma yoga in the pamphlet of Ecoversity. Now, dharma is necessary to run life, but Raja Yoga is also necessary. So what the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji once said, he says, Raj Bina, and I will explain it if someone doesn't understand it. He says, Raj Bina na dharam chale. You cannot run a dharam without power. Doesn't matter how good it is. It could be Hitler's religion, or it could be Mahatma Gandhi's religion. You need to be able to have those leadership skills, and you need to have those attributes where you can actually control to do something, whether it's a country, whether it's a courtroom as a judge, or whether it's in a small meeting room and you're arbitrating between a mum and a dad who's going to have a custody, or it could be between two multinational companies. The skill is the same. So he says, Raj bina na dharam chale hai, dharam bina sab tala male hai. So without having these principles of dharma, everything is basically useless. So that is the balance that I'm talking about. So Ecoversity, great concept, but do not, hopefully we don't remove. Sometimes the practitioners need to command the respect. When I go to a courtroom, my demeanor is different. I'm wearing a suit. I stand there, my voice change. I command respect in court. And that's what I teach my students. That's what I teach other lawyers. We have to strike that balance. And again, I don't know the entire concept of Ecoversity, but it sounds to me that is something that is really important, and it needs to happen to our education system. One more thing, and I strongly believe someone can change the way the legal profession or mediation or arbitration work. And if someone can bring this big change, it's not going to come from America and Australia. It's going to come from you guys. It's going to come from India. It's going to come from Bangladesh. It's going to come from China, right? It's because these values are inherent in us. It doesn't appear that way. These values are inherent in us. So one of my favorite revolutionists from Argentina, Che Guevara, he came to India and he said, these people are so far away from war, but they still waged a revolution, different to us, right? So I think we should stick to these principles that I was seeing, and I was captivated by a lot of things in Ecoversity. But we should not forget that, whoever will graduate from there, whoever will be a mediator, arbitrator, they need to have that quality of leadership. They need to have that quality to command respect from others.